Three top expat locations in the Americas where the smart money is going. Since Canada is one of the most developed nations in the Americas, the opportunity cost of leaving is high. As noted in Chapter 15, there is no pro-liberty oasis to flee to, not even close. That being said, some jurisdictions are more eager than others to attract foreigners, along with their capital and skills. That means expedited residence and tax perks worth considering. My objective in this chapter is to introduce 3 expatriation options in the Western Hemisphere for freedom-minded individuals: Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, and Uruguay. I have visited all 3 and would be open to moving there myself. With the explanations in tow and no hyperbolic promises, you can consider these places with your eyes open. Actions speak louder than words, and I divide my time between Colorado and Ireland. The former is a running mecca that is hard to beat. The latter connects me with my British Isles roots. We face unavoidable trade-offs in life. Admittedly, my approach entails higher taxes and a higher cost of living than I could find elsewhere. Where to put down roots is highly personal. Guatemala, for example, has no tax on foreign income, cheap living, and a low ratio of government spending to GDP. However, I cannot recommend Guatemala and left because of the pollution and low-trust society. The land of the free? As I wrote for the Epoch Times in October 2022, after getting my green card for permanent residence, the United States is still the place to be for lovers of liberty. Immigration officials tried to intimidate me with a dozen or so vaccine mandates, which I resisted. However, in general, U.S. residents enjoy both economic opportunity and a community that is relatively differential towards natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Given the proximity and no language barrier for most Canadians, the United States is their top destination for immigration. According to Statistics Canada, 893,491 Canadian citizens were living in the United States by 2017. Moreover, 49,769 Canadians moved to the United States during the COVID-19 spread between July 1, 2021 and June 30, 2022. I can thank Americans, particularly the Foundation for Economic Education, for introducing me to classical liberalism when I was an undergraduate student in Boston. The Institute for Liberal Studies, co-founded by anarcho-capitalist philosopher Jan Narveson, does this noble work in Canada. Further, finding kindred spirits in the United States as an immigrant has been easy. Countless groups have welcomed me, including the valiant Keep Colorado Free and Open network in nearby Loveland, for whom I've been a guest speaker. Similarly, the Loving Liberty Network radio station had me for an interview on Ask an Immigrant. I explained that the remnant of Americans who stand up for themselves, especially for free speech and the right to bear arms, are a treasure. Journalist Jill Colton of Ontario, now settled with her family in Florida, has also been on the show. She emphasized broader opportunities, a lower cost of living, and more respect for personal autonomy. However, you'd be surprised by the number of Americans looking to escape. Often they ask me about the merits of New Zealand. Many problems in the United States, chiefly from the anti-American federal government, parallel those in Canada. A couple of long-term American friends, including successful voice actor Jonathan Lockwood, have settled in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. This small city hosts many Canadians and is an expat bubble for living standards and safety. North Carolinian James Guzman returned from Mexico and moved to Texas for a while, only to feel suffocated and reestablish himself in San Miguel de Allende. He sells expat medical insurance and can assist with making the move south. Keep in mind, the opposite also happens. A Kiwi auto mechanic and video blogger went home from the United States in 2019, only to escape stateside after being disgusted with New Zealand's Big Brother lockdowns under then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. The US tax haven, Puerto Rico. New Hampshire and Wyoming stand out among US states for civil liberties, low taxes, and free enterprise, perhaps because neither has a major urban center or yuppie population. New Hampshire still has convenient access to Boston and is home to the Free State Project. This is a planned migration for, quote, liberty in our lifetime, unquote, that began in 2003. Wyoming placed second among the participants as their preferred destination. However, Puerto Rico as a U.S. territory is a peculiar case that offers serious tax advantages if you are amenable to life in the Caribbean. My visit there a decade ago introduced me to gorgeous beaches and lush forests, crazy drivers, and an odd mix of Latin American and US culture. The island is not everyone's cup of tea. Its customer service leaves plenty to be desired, and Spanish proficiency goes a long way. Puerto Rico enjoys some autonomy, but the territorial government needed assistance when it got into a fiscal crisis in the mid-2010s and defaulted on its debts. The island is a 3-hour flight from airports in Florida. With a population of 395,000, its port is the 8th most active in the United States. San Juan, the capital, has adequate road and transportation infrastructure, but still struggles at times with internet connectivity. The island's official languages are Spanish and English, but all government procedures are conducted in English. Most staple U.S. businesses, such as Walmart, Home Depot, and Walgreens, have a presence on the island, and the U.S. dollar is legal tender. Tax economist Daniel Mitchell on the Gold Newsletter podcast described Puerto Rico as a legal tax haven within the United States. He encouraged those moving there to be careful with their paperwork and compliance, but, quote, there are hundreds of well-to-do people who have moved to Puerto Rico. They are reaping the advantages of a much, much lower tax burden than if they had been in any of the 50 states, unquote. My British friend Adrian Day, a mining-oriented portfolio manager and financial newsletter writer, is among those who have made the move. However, he has shared with me that, if not for the tax advantages, he would consider leaving Puerto Rico. A name some readers will be familiar with is Peter Schiff, another financier who has moved to Puerto Rico. Canadians still need to pass U.S. immigration to move to Puerto Rico, and the TN visa is my favorite for getting started, see Chapter 17. The EB-5 Immigrant Investor Program is another attractive option. It offers permanent residency to foreign investors, their spouses, and their children under 21 years old, but it requires the incorporation of a business with at least 10 full-time jobs and capital investment of US $1.05 million. Puerto Rico's 2020 Tax Incentive Code, Act 60, provides exemptions to businesses and investors that relocate. Aiming to become an international service hub, Puerto Rico encourages entrepreneurs to connect with clients outside the island. The export sector, therefore, enjoys the main fiscal benefits: a flat 4% corporate tax rate on net income from sources outside Puerto Rico for 15 years, renewable for 15 more years, a tax exemption for distributed dividends, a 50% exemption on municipal taxes, a 75% exemption on property taxes. The most important requirement is that businesses and investors become effective residents. This infers for individuals living on the island for at least 183 days of the year. To be exempt from taxes on new property, you must buy it within the first 2 years of moving. This brief overview skips many legal details regarding Puerto Rico. My bilingual Economerica's team is available to assist with formalizing your presence there and with Costa Rica or Uruguay. If you are serious about this option, please review Paz Gomez's backgrounder, Puerto Rico's Allure as a Tax Haven, and consider contacting us. The Quieter Life, Costa Rica. A rarity in Latin America, Costa Rica has for generations enjoyed relative political stability and healthy institutions. The Fraser Institute ranks Costa Rica 21st in the world and first in Latin America for economic freedom. That is amid the slower pace of life known as Tico time. Tico is colloquial for Costa Rican. With economic growth propelled by foreign investment and trade liberalization, Costa Rica's development indicators stand out. Versus her neighbors, she has an established expat community and more of a first world feel. Panama also offers this to some degree. Further, there is a healthy free speech culture. When President Laura Chinchilla, 2010 to 2014, threatened to punish those accusing her of corruption, the first thing Costa Ricans did was take to social media en masse to mock her. Costa Rica has the lowest poverty rate in all Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2021, the GDP per capita was US $13,365, higher than the regional average, and an adjustment for purchasing power lifts that number substantially. Although Costa Rica's economic activity contracted by 4.6% during the COVID-19 spread, GDP rebounded swiftly and grew by 7.6% in 2021. The Costa Rican legal tender is the colon, although the use of US dollars is common. Since the 1990s, Costa Rica has attracted foreign companies to the country's 30 free trade zones, which offer generous tax exemptions. These include a 100% income tax exemption for the first 8 years and a 50% exemption for the following 4 years. To invigorate the post-pandemic economy, Costa Rica issued in mid-2021 the law to attract investors, retirees, and pensioners. This targets individuals who can contribute with lower sums of money to the Costa Rican economy. Retirees with a minimum pension of $1,000 per month, or those with a monthly income higher than $2,500, can move to Costa Rica and enjoy fiscal perks. After approval, applicants can enjoy the incentives for 10 years. The same applies to foreign investors allocating a minimum of $150,000 to the country's real estate, registrable assets, stocks, securities, and productive investments. The investors receive a 10-year residence permit, up from the previous 2 years, and can extend it for 5 more years. After that period, they can apply for citizenship. Foreign investors enjoy an exemption from import duties on household goods, an exemption from import duties on up to 2 vehicles for personal use, an income tax exemption on earnings qualified under the law, a 20% reduction of the transfer tax on assets acquired in Costa Rica, an exemption from import duties for professional or scientific assets. The law does not provide automatic fiscal residence. Investors must comply with the tax regime of their country of origin until they remain in Costa Rica continuously or discontinuously for more than 183 days in the same fiscal year. Marketing consultant Rachel Shee moved to Costa Rica from Toronto in 2021, and she agreed to share her frank reflection. Quote, "I moved at the peak of the pandemic, when the government was taking an increasingly draconian turn. My husband and I had both visited for holidays separately and liked the place. So we decided to try it out. We chose Ojochal, a quiet village about 15 to 20 minutes from the more popular surf towns of Uvita and Dominical. There is a large expat community here of young families amid increasing immigration to the area, with many people coming from Canada, the United States, Europe, etc. If you're considering a move to Costa Rica, you should visit for a short while to test the waters. There will be a huge adjustment curve. Everyone understands in theory that convenience culture will not exist, but expect everything to move slower. Western cultural norms such as customer service and efficiency do not really exist in Tico consciousness. The natural beauty is undeniable, but you should ask yourself if that is really all you need to feel like somewhere is home. Ultimately, Costa Rica was not right for me at this stage of life, as an early 30s young professional, and I will move on to the United States for more growth opportunities. I have no regrets about moving though. The 2 years I spent here was far better for me than the alternative of staying in Canada under the COVID-19 regime. I learned a lot about myself, and I'm happy to have this life experience under my belt." Unquote. She notes that Central America offers a different mentality and way of life. You can get lower taxes and a lower cost of living, along with a leisure-oriented community, but there appears to be less long-term opportunity. That makes Costa Rica more amenable to retirees and people who earn an income online and travel often for networking. Central Americans are well aware of the pluses and negatives of their neighbors. Their actions suggest a move to Costa Rica makes little sense if you're starting off with nothing. Impoverished Hondurans need only traverse Nicaragua to get to Costa Rica, barely a challenge. Instead, Hondurans opt for the long, treacherous journey north. Their revealed preference is the US economy, even with the language barrier for growth potential. The business gateway, Uruguay. No news is good news, and I suspect many of you reading this will have hardly heard of Uruguay, which is home to about 4 million people. While neighboring Argentina has had crippling inflation for decades, Uruguay has flown under the radar, and her peso has remained steady versus the US dollar. Financial author Doug Casey spends plenty of time in Uruguay, and that originally piqued my curiosity. She appeals as both a regional business hub and a nifty lifestyle option, although I need to get back to explore more of the country. On the ferry from Buenos Aires to Montevideo in 2016, the first thing I noticed was that you could trade currencies openly and at market rates. Argentina's fixed rates are a tax, and they especially pilfer foreigners. Port agents, for example, could not by law accept cash for my ferry passage. Payment had to be with a foreign credit card and at the Repu exchange rate. While in Uruguay, I was fortunate to visit author and columnist Hannah Fisher on the outskirts of Montevideo. Traveling to visit her reminded me of days gone by in New Zealand. The level of development, as I left the city, seemed akin to Hamilton. That is the city nearest the sheep and cattle farm where I grew up. Located in the southern cone, Uruguay has more cattle than people, and she is the safest and most politically stable country in South America, at least running neck and neck with Chile. Uruguay ranks near the top of world indexes for democracy, the rule of law, ease of doing business, and freedom of speech. Uruguay also boasts a well-educated workforce and is the world's leading exporter of software per capita. Uruguay is home to 11 privately run free trade zones, which host 1,094 companies and employ more than 16,000 workers. In 2020, their total output reached $5 billion, or 33% of the country's exports. Any foreign or local private company or individual can apply for a permit to develop its or his own free trade zone for any type of industry with a minimum investment of $10 million. The Sciences Park, for instance, began in 2011. It is a business and logistics hub with a focus on hosting export-oriented firms in the life sciences and health sectors. It hosts 55 firms, including pharmaceutical and medical cannabis companies, and employs 1,000 locals. Among the fiscal incentives of these free trade zones are zero taxes on land, value added, capital gains, and dividends. Further, there are no import tariffs on supplies and machinery for companies inside these zones. The only applicable taxes are those related to workers' Social Security contributions. Foreign workers, who can be 25% of a duty-free company, can opt out of them. Uruguay not only welcomes companies and investors. In May 2023, the government issued a 6-month residency permit for digital nomads, which is renewable for another 6 months. To apply, digital nomads need international medical insurance and written proof of their remote work or monthly income. That should exceed US $2,000 per month. Digital nomads settling in the capital, Montevideo, or the coastal city of Punta del Este will enjoy high-quality internet, top-class infrastructure, and safety. In addition, Plus Colonia, branded as a smart city, is growing near Punta del Este, and it is tailored to digital nomads. The first of its kind in the region, Plus Colonia attracts young people by offering low interest rates for real estate investment and a cutting-edge urbanistic technological design. In early 2023, developers of the 500-hectare city announced they had secured US $500 million worth of investments for the next 5 years. The first residential units will be ready this year, 2024.